Yes, come on.
Good evening, and welcome to the March 28th meeting of the Planning Policy Commission. Tonight we have some discussion on our city strategic plan draft. But first of all, we have, as usual, we have to have approval for the minutes from two of our last meetings. So do I have an approval for the February 14th approval? A motion to approve the February 14th meeting of the Planning Policy Commission.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes on the 14th and 28th.
This one.
14th?
I'll second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Do I have another motion to accept the minutes from February 28th?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of February 28th.
Is there any discussion?
I'll
Probably
second.
have a second.
I'll second.
No discussion, no changes?
No.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. So with that, we're going to go right into a discussion of the strategic plan by Jean Lynn, our senior planner. But first of all, after going through the strategic plan and seeing how many people in the city were involved in putting this together, I'd just like to say thank you for all the time that you as a city and the community have put together to come up with a very concise, nice strategic plan. So with that, Jean.
Thank you so much. Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Jean Lynn. I'm a planner with the Development Services Department, and I am here to talk to you about the draft strategic plan that is out for community input at this point. So for tonight, I'm going to give you kind of an overview of the draft plan, and I'm also going to talk about our community engagement process and how you can be involved. And I'll also talk a little bit about the next steps in the strategic planning process. So work on the strategic plan actually started about a year ago. We established some key goals in the plan that to help the city take on a more strategic approach to our work. And so some of these include better aligning efforts and focusing our energy to a clear vision and strategy to get us there. And then to work, most of our work is coming from the bottom up. So these are the priorities that our community has identified. With the plan, we're also looking to strengthen the city's ability to make deliberate, forward-looking, and informed strategic decisions. It'll allow us to better understand what our near-term actions are within this strategic context. It'll increase the use of metrics and performance measures to help us gauge and understand our progress, and also better inform our decision making. And then finally, it's really an important communication tool. It's a means of communicating to the community what the city's plans, priorities, and are, and how we're working towards meeting those goals. So we started with a broad community-wide engagement process, and we tried to get people from all corners of the community to participate in that process. We've established both qualitative and quantitative goals throughout the engagement process, and this slide actually shows some of the progress that we've made in terms of our outreach efforts. And we are also making an effort to regularly check back with the community. So far, to date, we've actually received over 1,600 responses on the strategic plan. And so this meeting tonight is a continuation of that checking back process. and checking in, really, making sure that we're,
They were part of the Meeting in the Box series.
Oh,
In the
wonderful.
very beginning, do you all remember that? Where we had Kristen and I had the flip charts, and there was someone from Talus in the audience that helped us with with the comments. It was just a great meeting. So, yeah, so this is a check back.
yes, this is a check back then. So as part of the process, we've developed a vision statement. And the vision is, Issaquah thrives as a welcoming community, creating a sustainable legacy for future generations that honors its rich history and passion for the natural environment. And again, this is a vision statement that we've crafted through all of our community engagement processes. So now we'll go into the plan itself, and all the parts and pieces of the plan and how they interact. So on the left of the screen there, I call that the Cliff Notes version of the plan. It has our vision, mission, and guiding principles, as well as towards the bottom of the plan, you'll see the 6 priority goal areas. And I'll go into those into a little more detail later on in this presentation. So each of the strategic priorities at the bottom come with their own goal statements as well. And with the goal statements, there's objectives and potential actions, as well as success measures on how to achieve those goals. So once again, here are the 6 strategic priority areas. They are mobility, growth and development, environmental stewardship, social and economic vitality, city leadership and services, and infrastructure. So the first goal area that I'll talk about is mobility. And so mobility's goal statement is getting around town is easier for people who live, work, and play here. And what this recognizes is that traffic affects many aspects of life in Issaquah. And some of the key elements of the objectives, potential actions, and performance measures focus on future growth in and around Issaquah, as well as considering multiple modes of transportation, and as well as the transportation improvements, system improvements as a whole. The next priority area is growth and development, and the goal statement for this priority is growth is proactively managed, planned, and communicated in a responsible way that retains our strong sense of community and livability. And again, this recognizes that Issaquah has been a rapidly growing community, and there are impacts as a result of that growth. And so some of the key elements of this plan include protecting the elements of the community's character, maintaining livability, protecting elements such as hillsides and neighborhoods, and then focusing our growth on the valley floor. The next priority area is environmental stewardship, and its goal statement states, environmental resources are proactively enhanced, protected, and stewarded. And it recognizes that the environment is a defining feature for Issaquah. And some of the key elements of this priority include a focus on the natural setting and strong community environmental values. It also focuses on engaging the community in being stewards of the environment and acquiring land for preservation as well as recreation. The next priority area is social and economic vitality, and its goal statement reads, an economically vital and diverse community is supported by robust businesses, affordable housing, and supportive services. And it recognizes that residential growth in our community has been outpacing job creation. And so some of the key elements of this priority include housing affordability, providing more jobs that give people the ability to both live and work within our community, and providing improved access to supportive services. The next priority is the city leadership and services, and its goal is leadership and accountability in the delivery of public services for our growing and diversifying community. And this priority recognizes that our community is becoming more diverse, and in response to that, we need to engage in different methods of communicating with the community, as well as focus on service delivery and how we can better deliver our services and focus on continuous improvements. Finally, we have the infrastructure priority, and its goal statement reads, an infrastructure system that is planned, designed, built, and well-maintained supports current and future community needs. It recognizes that infrastructure provides the underpinnings for our local economy, or economic vitality, as well as the environment, and it plays a pretty big role in our daily lives. And so some of the key elements of this priority include shifting the focus to consider not just expansion of our infrastructure, but also ongoing maintenance and replacement. And then it also does focus on some of the more recent growth as well as planned future growth. So that concludes the 6 priority areas. Then we're moving into how are we going to implement the plan. And we do have an implementation framework that includes some tools for how we would implement the strategic plan, which is the first in Issaquah. So there's 3 components to this framework. The first is the work plan component. That is on the lower left-hand corner of the screen with the 3 boxes. Let me see it right here. So what we're looking at is there's 3 critical components that kind of play off each other. This includes the strategic plan work plan, which is this plan that we're drafting. It also includes critical services work plan, which are the ongoing and necessary functions of the city. And then finally, it includes timely opportunities. So these are opportunities or emergent needs that come up as needed. And in terms of the overall priority, you get a sense of that with the sizes of the boxes. So the strategic work plan and critical services work plans play a fairly large role in our focus, whereas timely opportunities plays a relatively more minor role. The second component is we have strategic prioritization criteria, and there are 5 key criteria. They're not on this slide. But the criteria that we've developed would help us assess the relative favorability and timing of particular actions. And then finally, we have an annual cycle where we go through the process of planning, doing, evaluating, and adjusting, with the intent that, this is kind of a working document, and it is continually being improved and adjusted as needed. So that's kind of the circular cycle you see on the lower right-hand corner. So that brings us to where we are today. We're in the community engagement phase again, and we're looping back with everyone who's participated in the process so far, and we are collecting feedback through the online survey. So this is the link to the online survey, and I encourage everyone to go ahead and take that survey online. I'm not going to be taking any feedback tonight, but I encourage everyone to go online and provide feedback through the survey. And so in terms of next steps, what we're looking at is going back to council with this feedback in April. And then we're looking towards adoption of the strategic plan in May. I'm available to answer any questions. Thank you so much.
Do you know when the survey link closes?
Oh, yes. The survey link closes at the end of the month, so March 31st. So you've got a few days.
Till Sunday.
So to implement this plan, does the city expect to hire additional people to work on it?
So as part of this plan, one of the things that we've started identifying is the resources needed to try to implement the objectives and goals. I don't know about hiring, but it will definitely factor greatly into the budgeting process. And I believe there's also some prioritization of the actions and objectives.
Bringing that up, I would like to see that kind of prioritization because there are so many different facets in this. Somebody has to choose which are the most important to do at any specific time. So that would be nice to have some priority anyway in there.
Absolutely. I think we could bring that information
I actually
back.
found that to be a really big hole, especially in this implementation framework. There's no mention of ownership. It constantly says staff will. And as people who work with staff, we know that they're working all the time on all kinds of things. And this is a big lift. And I really felt that there ought to be actually like a paragraph talking about how the implementation is going to be implemented. Because right now it feels a little pie in the sky to me, and I would like a lot more details about that. Specifically, I think that we actually need somebody who is like a position like strategic development. Maybe that is its own department. Maybe every department has somebody who's assigned within it that says, this is where the buck stops. Because right now you're bringing in council and this big onerous issue of staff. I don't see this happening in a realistic way like we want to, because it's not lined out in a really clear way of how are we going to even attack the implementation. And I'm also not seeing any component where we're looping in the public, because you're asking really big questions. I know you don't have it on your slide, but the 5 questions that you want to go through for strategic prioritization are questions that not necessarily one individual can answer, because you're saying, what's the impact of this? That really requires a back and forth with people from all different backgrounds saying, hey, I see this avenue happening, and what about this being impacted? It requires a lot of collaboration to really see what these far-reaching effects are to be able to give that prioritization. And what I see that needs is the role of the public being able to comment. And so I would like to see not only there being a direct ownership that is either being given to people who are existing, and each department then has somebody who is accountable for it, or it's maybe one person and that's like their part-time job is really the strategic development. And I'd like to see a component of how the public is going to be brought in to say, hey, this is how this impacts me, and this is what I was thinking about this, rather than it being I can see this getting boiled down to a work session over lunch while everyone else is slammed between meetings. It's just something that's too big, I think, to just cram into what is already existing in the workload. And I would like to see something really addressed with that ownership.
If that doesn't happen to that degree, I'm looking at this wonderful plan and all the work that went into it. But like most other strategic plans in other areas, it's done very nicely, but it's on the shelf and it's not implemented to its full potential. And so when you, it's great, it sounds wonderful, and I just want to reiterate that you have to have more into it than what's here. It's always nice to say, we will have trees, but how do you get trees? Who is responsible for trees, as an example? I think that if this is the strategic plan, then there should be another implementation thing that's just this thick in each one of these, just like we did when we went through some of the plans that we went through. You need the follow-on. You need to know. It's nice to say we're going to have all the infrastructure that we need, but how do we get there, and what is the infrastructure that we need? We're missing those kinds of pieces in this.
To Joan's point, I kind of felt like that throughout the document, to be honest. I hear that you don't want feedback tonight because I have a good dozen comments, so I will put that in a form that you appreciate differently. But I'm going to give you one example on infrastructure. Your success measures are pretty limited to what we're talking about as far as the gravity of being able to actually track these things. So for instance, like I think there ought to be a list of issues with priorities, similar to the way we do with the TIP. I think there needs to be an actual hardcore list. I think it should be evaluated with engineers. I think there needs to be a prioritization given on that list. Something that's, again, measurable, trackable, something that's easy for people to put to email the city and say, hey, I'm really concerned about this. Hey, I was driving past this, I saw this, and being able to actually have a real tangible list of things. Throughout this document, we have a lot of great ideas without necessarily a direct correlation to being able to say we are addressing this specific issue, which I think is really important for the implementation of it. So I'll put, again, I won't go through all of my comments, but I think that that's one example. When you look at these success measures, they can be a little more vague, and I think we need to work on really honing in. This is the place that people can submit. This is the place where we can actually have a hardcore list of people saying, I wonder what the city's doing about that, and we can have a measurable spreadsheet that says that.
I have a question. As far as the 1,650 people that responded, how many people were given this document to respond to? Was this?
I believe the 1,650 people that responded have been, that's kind of a total responses we've received throughout the process so far.
Sure. So how many people have seen this? Do you have like a ballpark figure? Did this go out to the whole city?
And I think it's the amount of people that have input till now. You guys being included, since you were at one of the meetings that we talked about the beginnings of it, and then I think now that the draft is coming out, the ticker will go up again because now there's actually something else to respond to. So I would guess that the 1,600 were part of putting it together,
Okay.
not reacting to this exact draft, because this just
Yeah.
came out 2 weeks ago, I think.
Yeah.
Right.
So specifically, most of those 1,600 people just answered the survey?
Or were part of the meetings in a box, or they were part
No,
of the
I
outreach.
understand that
Oh.
part, but just to separate them, how many just came in through the survey? Do you have that number?
The original survey, no.
Yeah, I don't have that number, but we could,
Say it again? Oh, okay. 1,300.
Oh, okay. Well, there's 3 more days to answer the survey and give us your thoughts about the strategic plan. So anybody out there that would like to do that, please do. Any other questions? Thank you.
thank you so much.
Thanks, Jean. And the next topic is near and dear to our hearts. We talked about the existing list of treasures that we did back in 1993. And we've had a lot of discussions internally with all the things going on, one of them being the strategic plan. And Leeson, who is one of our amazing coordination, neighborhood coordinating, communicating, she does everything, people, she said, remember when I went out to the neighborhoods and we had this great thing happen? And I was like, oh, which is sort of like the treasures 20 years later. And so I wanted Lisa to come explain what she did, how she did it, and what the outcome was, to see if this is sort of the next step of the treasures that happened, just 2 years ago, right? And so I will let Lisa take over.
Great. Thanks for the introduction. Good evening, commissioners and residents and those that are watching. Thanks for having me here. And my name is Lisa Gouge. I'm the Neighborhood Engagement Coordinator for the city. I've been here now about 3 years. My position, just a little bit of a background, came from a council goal. Their hope was to have more interactions on a neighborhood basis. So going out to the neighborhoods instead of always having residents come to the city to engage. So I ran the first year of my program as a pilot, and then luckily I am still here with a full-time job and love what I do, so I'm also an Issaquah resident. But one of the things that this came out was when I first started, I really wanted to connect with the different neighborhoods, and we right now go off of the 13 sub-areas, which is something that also planning uses to kind of keep it a linear thing that everybody can associate with. And so you'll see those on this neighborhood map. But I came up with this idea of having the first neighborhood summit. And I invited what I call neighborhood champions from each of these 13 sub-areas to come and just to talk. And so we had all 13 represented, which was very cool. And there were about 30 people that participated. And the question that I asked them was, what makes your neighborhood unique or special? And then they started throwing out all of the things that made their different neighborhoods special, why they loved living in the neighborhood that they live in. And so there were a lot of sticky notes that this was at first, before it was a beautiful art piece. And then a visual artist took the sticky notes and then kind of put together this tangible piece that we've really been able to hold on to throughout Issaquah. You know, it has all the different, not only landmarks that you'll see on there from within the city, but it also has experiences. So there's different, like 4th of July is really big in South Cove for that general area. You know, there's an Easter egg hunt there. There's a big Easter egg hunt in Tallis. So things like that. So it was it kind of evolved to this tangible, I guess, if you will, a feel of what really makes Issaquah special. So we thought it was a really great exercise. It's kind of a living, breathing document that kind of shows how it's evolved, and then still some of the same historical elements that we have. But it's also a little bit more than just, I know we have a list of treasures that we all love from '93, but I think it was just interesting listening to kind of some of the things that make it unique, where a lot of experiences within their own neighborhood that maybe not be on the Issaquah treasures list. So I think I'm here just to kind of give you an overview about how this evolved, and maybe help think about a way to kind of capture that as we move forward. I know there's going to be a lot more discussions on kind of what happens, where the treasures come in, strategic plan, obviously, if and when that gets adopted, where they fit underneath that, to preserve character of neighborhoods is important. I think also that came out of this when I looked at it. And yeah, I'm just kind of here to answer any questions, show you this. You have a copy as well that I hope you take home and really look at, because every time I look at it, I feel like I see something different.
Where's Waldo?
But this was in conjunction as well with our 125th birthday when I first came on board too. So happy to answer any questions.
Any
And
question?
The only treasure that I could not find on there was the Mist in the Mountains from the original list. Everything else is on there.
I really think this map is cute, and it's something that, you know, kind of puts everything together. But if we're using this as showing people outside our community what our community has, I think that it misses. It doesn't show enough about the exactly where each one of the neighborhoods is, and exactly what other things are listed. There might be trees, but there are this, 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 and this in that neighborhood. I'm sure that they've said more than 2 or 3 things like what South Cove did. It would be nice at some point in time to be able to say, this is what these neighborhoods are, so people coming into the community could know which one they fit into and start looking there if they wanted to buy a home or use a park or whatever. So, that would be nice. I think it's important. No questions?
Is the idea to hand this map out, so I'm not really understanding if this, is this like an outreach program, and how exactly is outreach done with this map? I actually enjoy the map. I couldn't find,
Oh, I think it's fun.
I couldn't find Front Street, but other than that, I really enjoyed it. But in terms of practicality, how is this map actually going to be used other than the 4 of us looking at it?
Yeah, that's a great question. A lot of it's just, it's a lot of fun, like you say. You enjoy looking at it. It's also something that I think certainly the people that were involved feel a sense of ownership over it. But it's also something that, when you do go over to different neighborhood pockets, it's fun for them to look at, and it's nice for them to see kind of, oh yeah, that is something that we really value and treasure. I also do think it does show a little bit of what's unique in every neighborhood, which is nice. I mean, like in the Highlands, it shows the Highlands Fiber Network. That's not something that, every neighborhood has. And then there's a couple other things, like Central Issaquah is known for Confluence Park Bridge now. So just little things like that. But it's kind of just I know I'm here tonight just to kind of give you another thought process of how you can make a list tangible, how we could maybe start thinking about what we want to do. I know in the city right now we're also doing a branding and wayfinding, which is a really big part of kind of that outer what Issaquah is going to be, feel like, and there's a big team working on that. So where that's going to land this year with the DMO, with city and also with the chamber. So I think kind of all of this is a conversation that I foresee ongoing for a while, and kind of how it all fits in with strategic plan, branding, wayfinding, and things like that. So
I think you should frame it and put it in several different places. I mean, I think it's so colorful and so fun and stuff. I really think it should be highlighted in different areas of the city, so.
Not that the mural that went up on the end of the teriyaki building isn't beautiful, but I'm thinking like something like this would be great there. But, Japan Ginger Teriyaki, they put that beautiful mural up there like 3-4 months ago. Something like this would be great.
I'd be happy with it here
Yeah.
or in I mean, someplace that's part of the city, but, if somebody could do this in a mural,
I'm glad you brought up the branding and wayfinding, because what I really liked, what struck me about this and what I liked about it was that it was how these neighborhoods are defining themselves rather than how other people see the neighborhoods. And so I was like, wait, there's multiple neighborhoods who would define themselves by their Easter egg hunt. I think that's really interesting. And so that's what I really liked about it, because I think that we push the city in a lot of ways to be like, hey, we want detailed maps of all these different things. And so it was actually nice to see one that really wasn't about where roads are and what direction. Because at first I was like, wait, north is down. And then I was like, it doesn't matter. There's so much joy in this thing. So I honestly was hoping that we could make them into postcards. And every time you needed to go into City Hall to renew a license or a tab, there was a little stack there. I just see it as being a great promotional thing, because I think it really exudes how people feel about where they're from, which is something that we don't necessarily always get in the work that we do here. And I love that about this map.
it'd be nice to be on the front page of the website.
Yeah, with the ability to download.
When we
print out.
redesign it.
that's a great
I
idea.
mean, this is put together by the people.
Yes.
And, if you looked at this map, you wouldn't know unless you had the background or something on here said, people have told us or whatever.
Sure.
But I think you should propagate it as much as you can.
Thank you.
It's just so colorful. It's just so nice to be hanging on the wall somewhere.
A second, Joy, Joan and Bill's comments.
Right. Well, we may be using you in the future, 'cause we were thinking with this just have happening 2 years ago, and the strategic plan has that whole part of growth and development. I don't know if you saw the part about the charm in all the neighborhoods. We have a feeling that, and when and if, like you said, it gets adopted, that will be one of the projects that comes to long range, and probably you all. And so I think part of defining the charm would be doing something, not maybe this, but the next generation. You know, we went from the list of 35 to 5 million, lots more colorful than the 93 list was, but still important. But then maybe the next generation is neighborhood by neighborhood by neighborhood that shows not only what makes them special, but also that charm piece of it that we'll have to define and know it when we see it and when we don't see it. And so we're thinking, and I want you to ponder this, you don't have to decide tonight, maybe not working on the treasures this year through the comp plan because there's so many plates that are still spinning. But once it's actually adopted in the strategic plan and we get that as a work plan, probably next year, that then we can unpack it with a new focus, neighborhood by neighborhood. So you don't have to answer yet. But just I want you to ponder that, because when we realized that it had been redone already this recently, we thought, is it really time for us to just update them or renew them without sort of an underlying why? And so we thought the piece in the strategic plan sort of gave us another reason why we would want to update and renew and figure them out a little differently. But we're open to thoughts and how you feel about it, but you don't have to like come up with a this is the way kind of an idea tonight.
So we'll think.
I have a question for Trish. How would you draw the mountain mist? That last
I would have
treasure.
just put little things on all the sides.
Okay, so we can't forget the mountain mist.
Room right on the
Yeah, there's room
side.
for it. I noticed right away there's room for it in the forested hillsides.
Right between the gap where Mount Rainier is.
Yeah,
You.
yeah, there's room for the mist. Because I'm hoping
All
it's
of
on
our
the next
treasures in there.
list.
There's always a way.
Yes.
Joan.
Any other questions for Leeson? Oh, you have to come up to the microphone, Robin, because
Yeah,
it's our
thank you.
huge television audience needs to hear you.
I asked you if you wanted to speak. You
Well, I didn't until I saw this.
Isn't it
I think
beautiful?
it's wonderful and colorful, and I would love to see it utilized. I think that it's confusing to call it a map. And I think that's maybe where people will get stuck, because you're not going to use this to go anywhere. So having some other naming protocol for this, I think would help people understand and accept it for what it is, representing these wonderful things, not wayfinding.
Right.
Something maybe along Joy's point, which is how the neighborhoods feel about themselves. Something like that.
Well, with some kind of a
Self-reflection.
direction of where they are.
I like that, self-reflection.
Oh, thank you.
Any other comments
Very
for
much.
Leeson? Any other comments for Leeson?
No, I think,
Looks
good
great.
job. It's fun.
Awesome.
I especially like the fact that you were able to bring 13 different neighborhoods together at the same time. Not only does it bring the city closer, it, enables people to know each other and see what they have, and maybe I need that in my neighborhood. And so the discussions, I'm sure, were fun and good.
I think, and to your point, that was actually the number one thing that came out of that particular meeting, was that residents really wanted an opportunity to meet other residents from different neighborhoods, to be able to network with neighborhood, ideas, neighborhood issues. So that was something that was really important that we heard in that particular meeting, just like you're saying, is nice to connect those connections that they wouldn't maybe normally have with other people in the community and other neighborhoods.
Yes.
Great. And you still have the champions, right? The neighborhood?
Yeah, in fact, we're planning on some more this year, so I'll let you know when those
That's
happen.
so important, especially
great.
as we grow. This really feels like the heart of where we've come from.
Yeah.
Right. Well done. Thank you for coming. Super, super fun. And thanks for bringing them their own, very own graphics. I love that.
Now I have to go home and get a frame to frame this and find a place to put it.
Mine's bent.
I'm going to put these, she gave you life-size ones.
Yes.
I'm going to put these here, but I don't know if you'll need them. It's up to you guys whether you need them or not.
So Trish is going to update us
The strategic plan, or the.
on
the
Puget
other-
Sound Regional Council's 2015 plan, 2050 plan.
Can I ask a question before you start?
Yes.
Who wrote this document?
Which document?
You're going to go over the King County Regional, what you're about to
Oh, the
present.
Puget Sound Regional Council staff did.
Phenomenal.
And a quick byline, I am not an expert on this plan. I am only the messenger. But feel free to ask me questions, but the chances that I know the answers are not 100%.
Thank you, sir.
But I will do my best to
Thank you.
all of it. So here we are. Vision 2050, the draft supplemental environmental impact statement is out. And what that means is the Puget Sound Regional Council is asking for comments on the supplemental environmental impact statement, and they're asking for comments by April 29th. And so the purpose of this meeting with PPC is to get the word out that Issaquah City Council has established 3 dates in April to not only get a presentation from PSRC staff that wrote it and are totally understanding of every element and piece of it. That will happen April 8th. And then they will announce too that on the 1st, the staff will provide the presentation. And then on April 8th, we'll take public comments because we figure you'll have a chance to been educated on it, to watch the presentation, to ponder any comments that you might have. And then on the 15th, the council will actually talk about the presentation, the comments they've received, and kind of deliberate their thoughts, and then they will be able to decide what kind of comments they want to share with PSRC on the SEIS and the 3 alternatives. And if you're not able to share comments at the council meeting, there's a website link where you can actually go right in and give your comments directly to PSRC. And the neat thing about that is they track them by city. So we'll be able to tell that, 100 comments came from Issaquah or how many ever. So that's a cool thing that PSRC is doing is tracking them by location. So that's the purpose of the meeting, and what I'll try to do now is educate you just a little bit about the 3 alternatives and sort of how they're different based on the executive summary that I shared with you. So I'm not making up anything that I didn't find either on their website or on in their executive summary. The other piece of this, there's 3 alternatives in the environmental impact statement, the supplement. And as you may know or may not know, environmental impact statement has to look at 3 alternatives. One that would be what they call no action, which would be staying the course of whatever was in place previously. And so that's sort of your, if you were a scientist, that's sort of your, nothing changes in that one. That's your, I can't remember the word for my science days. And then there's an alternative that works with a lot of the plans and policies and pieces that you have. And then there has to be one more so that you have like a way to compare 3 of them. So in addition to the 3 alternatives that the SEIS looks at, they've also started to distribute draft policies. And so far there's only 3 elements out. And the stack there are the new, or actually all the policies that they've put out for housing chapter, environmental chapter, and the development patterns chapter. Last night we shared the environmental policies with River and Stream Board. and they had quite a lot of fun with them. They had a really good discussion on them. We're not sure yet as a city if the council will want us to look at the policies at this point. That's up to them to say, PPC, we would really love a recommendation from you all on the policies. The policies don't have to be commented on until, I think, early summer, because they're not all out yet, just the 3 chapters are out. And although there's a lot of policies in the Vision 2050, there's not a lot that have changed, and those are the ones we're focusing on, are the ones that have changed and that we think will affect us, Issaquah. So I'm just giving you that before I do the alternatives, to know that even though the alternatives are exciting, the policies are really what affect us or don't affect us. So probably gone over everything in this slide. Oh, some of the numbers that are pretty exciting, I thought they were, well, first, the first number, the Puget Sound Regional Council includes 4 counties. King County, which is us, Snohomish, Pierce, and Kitsap County. Those are what this whole growth vision is for, those 4 counties. It's an update of 2040, the Vision 2040, which was done in 2008. The new one, 2050, says the region, 4 counties, need to plan for 1.8 million additional people and 1.2 million additional jobs. So those are some big numbers to think about. And the 3 alternatives, one, stay the course, which would be no action, which technically isn't no action, but it's no change in the action. That's the first one. The second one is called transit-focused growth. And the third one is called reset urban growth. They also have, they say that the existing policies, those are the ones that have come out. I already mentioned that. So are you ready for the next slide? Or any questions before I launch into it? Okay. This is the 4-county region. Snohomish to the north, King County's in the middle, Pierce is to the south, and Kitsap is over with the water. The easiest way. And you'll see that there are labels for the cities and the areas. The very top of the legend, the big black dot, Regional Growth Center, Issaquah is a regional growth center. The first color, metropolitan cities, Issaquah is not. Those are the big 5, Seattle, Bellevue, Bremerton, Tacoma. Did I say Bellevue?
Kirkland?
Bellevue, Seattle,
Everett.
Bremerton, Tacoma.
Everett.
Everett, thank you. It's like, oh, I'm forgetting someone important. Issaquah is a core city. So we're that second color orange down on the legend. And then the third one is a high-capacity transit community. Those are the big ones to take the growth in most of the scenarios. The other ones are cities and towns and urban unincorporated. Those are when you start getting away from the urban growth line. So I wanted you just to have a visual before we launched into the alternatives. Just quickly stay the course. You were right, it was Everett. Well done, you guys. The largest share continues to go into the 5 big metropolitan cities. Some growth is focused in the core cities, especially because there's transportation and economic hubs there. So this scenario continues on the way we've been going. Some of the pieces that I thought were interesting is that this one currently keeps most of the growth in the urban area and not as much out in the unincorporated urban and the rural area. I always think that's a good thing. The second alternative is transit-focused. So as you can imagine, all the growth goes to not only the big 5 metropolitan cities, but the core cities and the high-capacity transit communities. So again, the greatest role for the areas that have the transit abilities would be to take the growth. In fact, this one has an explicit goal of 75% of the region's population and employment growth has to go along these areas within a quarter mile or half mile from transit. So this was one of those, we keep talking about this, let's have one of the alternatives actually do this and put all the new growth, 75% of it, right along the areas that have that transit ability. the part that's not the 75% would be shared amongst the areas that don't have high capacity, but only the 25%. And this one also gives higher levels of growth to King County and comparatively lower in Kitsap, Pearson, Snohomish, because there's not as much transit, high-capacity transit in those areas. So the King County would get the higher level of growth. And the third alternative, reset urban growth. This one follows more some of the actual action that's happened since this was first done in 2008, where some of the areas that are not incorporated got a lot of growth. I shouldn't say a lot, got growth. Some of the rural areas still received growth. And this would say that those areas can go up to their capacity plus 10%, and then the rest would go to the urban areas. And so this is allowing the rural and the urban areas that are not incorporated to allow them to go to their capacity and have that be part of the forecast. So this is just a different tact on resetting urban growth on where it would go. So this wouldn't focus them in transit areas. This would sort of be more distributed, not by transportation or infrastructure, but just by the capacity that's in the areas. So all three alternatives are very different. This has the highest alternative, as I said, for growth in unincorporated areas. So that would be, trying to think of one that you would know of. Maple Valley, I don't think is incorporated. So it would be those outlying areas that aren't a city, but they're definitely a township or a town kind of a thing.
Like
and so that
Preston?
would be 12% population and 6% employment would go in those unaffiliated, unincorporated areas. So this is a table that actually Keith did to try to understand the differences in the alternatives. And we took this from the chart that had the arrows. It had like a lot more descriptions in the arrows up or down, whether or not it changed stay the course. A lot of the alternatives are super close. For example, one that's different is the percent of population and employment, 1, 2, 3, 4 down. For the first alternative, stay the course, 48% of population is near high-capacity transit. 75% in alternative 2, 44% in alternative 3. I love the average drive time and time stuck in traffic. I love that we forecast that kind of thing. Alternative 2 with transit, the drive time goes down and the time stuck in traffic goes down a little bit. As a land use planner, something that I thought was interesting, the third item down, amount of land needed to accommodate growth. The first and the third, 322 million acres, and the third one is 331 million acres versus the transit is 285 million. So there's less land needed for growth in alternative 2. So it's just a different way of looking at the charts that they put in. We tried to put in one little chart, what they had, I think 4 pages with the arrows. Although there was a lot of good information, it was hard to take all in. If you just looked at the raw numbers of population and employment, blue is stay the course, and this is core city, this would be Issaquah. Red is the transit, green is the resetting urban. It's a another rough way to look at it. Hopefully this whets your appetite to think, to dig in a little bit, because, regional planning is big. A lot of it's market driven, a lot of it's employment, who's there, who's coming, where do people choose to live. This slide moves into the next part, and I don't know if you want to do the next part or if you want to wait till we're asked to do the next part, but of all the policies and actions that are in the existing Vision 2040, this is how many have been new or changed and have actions with them in only the 3 chapters that they've drafted yet and that are out available for review. So totally up to you if you wanted to go through them. I'll just show you a slide to show how I was thinking of it if you wanted. This is a draft of the housing chapter. There's only 3 on here that have the little blue stars. Whoops. That in staff looking at it, we think that we need to look at them because they affect Issaquah. For example, H5 says, expand the supply and range of housing, and the part that's new, at densities to maximize the benefits of transit investment. We want to know what benefits mean. We want to know what maximize means, and we want to know that if we've already upzoned area like Central Issaquah just recently, upzoned the whole big area, would we still have to go higher? Or would our upzoned new plan regional growth center, would that already count to fit in with that? So that's just an example of questions that we have for PSRC when they come and share their new drafts. We could go through them all, or you could take the list of policies home and ponder them, and we may get to go through them between now and early summer if the council wants to go that way. Totally up to you all.
I don't mind picking Trish's brain while we're here.
It doesn't bother me.
Pondering?
Yeah. I'm
We'll
fine with it.
ponder.
So you want to take them home and ponder?
Oh.
Okay. Any other questions for me? Feel free to go, if you can't be at council, feel free for you and your neighbors to go on the website. There's a new draft, or a new, what do they call it, news flash that says again that the survey is open for the SEIS for PSRC, so you can go in and take the survey on how you feel about the alternatives, and I think there's questions about growth and transit and all sorts of good things. Feel free to take the survey if you can't come to council and give them your thoughts.
I was all right with you explaining it.
Yeah, I am too.
Oh, okay, so not a ponder.
Not a ponder.
Okay. How
about you two?
How about you, Bill and Joan?
I'm indifferent. I'm fine either way. It's a lot to soak in.
There's a lot of, I can just go over
Cliff notes.
The stars, if you want, yeah.
because the actual stack on the
Actually,
corner
it's
there.
over here.
Oh,
These are
the stack that
we
went.
moved them.
Actually has all the policies, even the ones that didn't change, because I
Yeah.
couldn't figure out how to cut and paste to just, because you may find some that are super important that we missed. That's totally possible. Okay, well, I mentioned H5 that had this substantial change that we have questions about. The second star is H8, expand housing capacity for moderate density. Now, moderate density for the region is 14 to 49 units an acre. Our medium density goes to 15 an acre, so that would count in this. Our higher density goes the rest of the way. So just so you know that their moderate density isn't the same as our moderate density. But it says expand housing capacity for modern density to bridge the gap between single family and more intense multifamily. And again, we're wondering, is this to be done locally? Do we need higher densities? What is it that they're asking local jurisdictions to do with this policy? Because it seems like quite a big change from encourage the use of innovative techniques. I mean, it seems much more direct than it was before. So that's why it has the star. And stop me if you have questions on any of these. D, again, is a verb, identify potential physical, economic, and cultural displacement of low-income households and marginalized populations that may result from redevelopment and market pressure. Use a range of strategies to mitigate displacement impacts to the extent feasible. And again, we're going to ask them what they're intending for that. Is that something new, something extra? Is that done locally? Is it done countywide? How is that done? For development patterns, the first one that gave us pause was number 2. they changed, we're totally in favor, encourage efficient use of urban land. And then it says, and increasing density in the urban growth area consistent with regional growth strategy. And again, we're wondering, does our upzone for the regional growth center that we have, does that count towards this, or do we have to go again and increase it again? That's our question, one of our questions. Letter A, plan for densities that maximize benefits of transit investments. Again, we want to understand what they mean by benefits, and we want to know if that means our densities have to go up as well.
So, quick question, because I don't know enough about PSRC. So their three alternatives are essentially what they think is going to happen as far as growth through 2050. Do
Three
their
that could happen.
right, that could happen, and they can't really direct what's going to happen. They can just forecast how they think we're going to grow as a region.
Right.
Does their document or their policies directly impact anything that we do from the Issaquah standpoint? Can they say, we have a policy that you're going to add more density in this one area to accommodate transit, and so does that force us to change the way we plan, or are these just suggestions?
Right, well, that's what we're going to ask, because some of the changes to their policies seem very specific to what areas need to do.
This is the first time it sounds like they've given us policies on growth, right?
Right.
So in the past, when they do that, are those suggestions for how we think we should grow? Or do they have do they actually direct us on how we do zoning and other things?
Right, I would say most of it is they're encouraging us, they're trying to direct us so that we all meet the strategy. When we do comprehensive planning and when we applied to them to be a regional growth center, we had to commit to making certain density, allowing a certain amount of density in the central plan where the regional growth center is. And so we had to commit to that to be certified, if you will, as a regional growth center, and that allows us now to get funding from them. Now we're eligible for funding from PSRC because they have a lot of grant money for transportation projects.
Okay.
And so in that sense, we're committed with them to accommodate certain densities in the regional growth center.
Okay.
And so that we're sure of. We're just wondering whether the new set of policies changes that relationship anymore. Do we actually have to go higher than what we were approved at, or is everything fine with what we were approved at?
I see, okay.
But it's typically, they don't have a hammer other than when we've already committed to something, or if we're trying to vie for transportation funding.
So what we've committed to is through 2040 on an original plan, and we're seeing possible changes to tacking another 10 years onto that through 2050.
Actually, what we've committed to is the Central Issaquah Regional Growth Center, which is our plan, and they approved it. It fits into the regional strategy of Vision 2040, but it isn't. We didn't agree. Well, we agreed not inadvertently. Because our plan goes along with their regional strategy and all of our densities and all of our provisions, we're in compliance with Vision 2040.
Okay.
Say it that way.
And is there, as part of the 2040 plan, is there a point called out where they can come in and change it all or make modifications?
Not to us specifically, but their language in the update can cause us and other jurisdictions to do things a different way, depending on how they're written. And so that's what we want to understand is some of their language actually says local jurisdictions will do this. And we're wondering, is there money for local jurisdictions to do this? Is there, timing for local jurisdictions to do this? Because we may not have the money or the resources to do whatever it is they're asking us to do. So we're just trying, in the draft stage, we're trying to understand what they're asking us to do or what they're trying to direct us to do, just so we know what's expected.
Okay.
Good questions.
It's my understanding, too, that this is also like a matter of compliance, because the state has directed this is kind of like this downward trickle from what the legislator has said, this is what we need and want from our communities to give us. And so this is like, if we could in theory have been in compliance with 2040, but 2050 has new language that directs do things, if we're out of compliance, then we can then not be eligible for this grant funding. So in a way, it's my understanding, Trish, tell me if I'm wrong, this does impact us in terms of like, you know, when we talk about making ourselves a regional growth center, being certified, we could fall out of compliance, still be a regional growth center, getting growth, but not actually getting the benefits from that if we are like, well, we're not going to adhere to these certain things. Not like there's a punitive measure, but there's a level of like needing to be within what this new direction would be.
Right, because I would say if let's say we decided to change some of the zoning in the regional growth center, and all of a sudden we're below the threshold that we agreed to for them to certify us, then we would certainly be out of compliance, and we'd probably lose our eligibility for transportation funds. That would be like a, what is the word when it's so obvious? I mean, that would be clearly a, you know, we're not in compliance anymore. Some of these are so general that you wonder, are you giving us 10 years to do this? Are you giving, you know, is there a timeline? Is there a deadline? Is there, are there ramifications if we can't do it in that time? Like one of them is a housing analysis to see this, you know, how much you have, and what if we can't do a complete housing analysis in 7 years or in 10 years? Does that make us fall out of compliance with the whole thing because we can't afford to do whatever it is that they're asking? So those are the kind of things where, because we work really well with PSRC, so we just want to be sure that we understand what they're expecting of all the local jurisdictions.
So you have a lot of questions. I would hope or think that if you couldn't meet the exact requirements, that you would create your plan, take it to PSRC, and they would decide if it was good enough for what they had hoped would happen. This is all we can do, so this is, you know, this is our plan. Do we get close enough to what you project? My heartburn with some of these plans is county, state make rules that are general without, for all the cities, and each city is different, and there is only so much that they are capable of doing. They only have so much land to have so many new housing starts. They don't take that into consideration. They just blanket it. So somehow, somewhere, it's got to come up to, we can't do it. No. Just can't do it.
It seems like this is much more carrot, much less stick approach from PSRC. Okay.
Right, I'd agree.
Where can we or the public get more information on kind of how that whole relationship works between PRSC and the city of Issaquah?
The relationship as far as how
I guess what the commitment is for Issaquah, what those numbers are for Issaquah agreeing to be.
that would be in the Regional Growth Center. That would be the actual approved numbers for growth and development and densities that are in the Regional Growth Center. Actually, it's in the Central Issaquah Plan. There's a little section, when we got approved, we had to put a section in the central plan that talked about the Regional Growth Center. And one of the goals or policies is we have to prioritize infrastructure funding to the Regional Growth Center. That was something that was required by to be certified, is we had to say as a city, we're going to try and make sure a majority of, or prioritize, I can't remember the exact words, infrastructure funding where all the new growth and jobs are going to go. So there were things like that we had to put into the plan to be compliant.
They're like commitments is what I kind of remember when we were
Right.
going through them. They were
Right.
things
And-
that we dedicated ourselves to as a commitments of how we were going to plan moving forward based on getting the certification of being a regional growth center.
Right. And
And
then
we're
they
s-
in turn certified that that now we're eligible for transportation funding, that we weren't before.
Okay, and so right now, we're certified.
Yes,
And that
yes.
certification lasts through 2040.
It lasts as long as we keep the regional center zoned and that we keep doing all the things we said we were going to do in the regional growth center.
Okay, and so now city council wants them to talk to city council about language in the new updated proposal.
Vision 2050 to make sure that it's not nullifying anything we did in Central. We're just trying to understand how far does Vision 2050 go? Does it not change Central at all? That would be great. Does it change the Regional Growth Center at all? Maybe not, but we just want to be sure before we say that this is great, to make sure that all of a sudden there aren't hidden
Large
things that we have to
discrepancies.
do that we're not ready to do yet.
I think of it more as like this extra layer than necessarily, like you were talking about, more carrot versus stick kind of a thing. It's less of like us having to hit specific numbers. It was more that we kind of joined this club of people saying, as cities, this is what we want to commit ourselves to, of how we're going to grow and how we're going to help this kind of share this, burden kind of in a way. We know we have population coming. How can we plan for it in a responsible, sustainable way? Rather than necessarily like, you haven't hit that number, so.
Well, they do review.
But we had to
It sounds like we
accommodate
have to
them.
hit, we have to hit
Yeah.
density numbers, we have to hit housing numbers. There's specific metrics that we have to hit to qualify.
We do, but
They're not
these-
suggestions.
No, they're not suggestions, but these are layers of how we then implement it, rather than necessarily those.
Got that. No, I
Guidelines.
totally understand. So when was the 2040, when was that planned with city council? When did we commit to those numbers?
In 2008, Vision 2040 was adopted by PSRC, and then we ran through them. When we updated our comp plan in, I think it was 2015, wish Kristen was here because she would remember exactly, we had to actually put the PSRC Vision 2040 policies into our existing comp plan and show how we met them. And that was an output of, so that PSRC knew that we were actually thinking of them and their policies when we were updating ours. So
Right.
that was the big 8-year, well, I don't know if it's 8 years now, but it was every 8 years you had to completely overhaul all their elements of the comp plan. And that was one of the requirements for the overhaul, is you had to address PSRC's Vision 2040 to make sure we were in compliance.
Got it.
And
Okay.
we were. We passed with flying colors. But that was a new piece in the introduction that we had to start out with, that we were in compliance with the regional plan.
Yeah, it's like 19% growth by that time, spread out amongst Puget Sound.
Yeah.
It's quite a bit.
It's such an exciting area, too, and the 4 counties are so different, too, but we're all in it together. Okay, I went through A. The other page on development patterns, address existing health disparities and improve health outcomes. That's a totally new one. We're not sure what they're asking exactly. We're going to hopefully get some direction on that one. And then action 7, minimum densities in transit station areas. This is another one that we're curious if it changes our regional growth center or if our regional growth center already meets action 7. But we just want to be sure. Do you want to go through environment, knowing that I think there's only a few other than land or river and streams went through yesterday. This one talks about noise and light pollution and transportation and public facilities. So this is a bigger change than the original. We want to understand what they mean by mitigating all of those things. And the second one was the Regional Open Space Conservation Plan, which sounds like an amazing document, but we haven't seen it yet. So we flagged that one to make sure that it goes with our our park strategic plan. We want to be sure that they're not in conflict with each other. And the last 2 are counties and cities will work to address open space conservation access needs identified again in the new plan that we haven't seen yet. So we flagged that just to be sure that that we're in agreement with the new plan. And then also, cities and counties will incorporate emission reduction policies. You may recall in the comp plan, we already have a climate change, greenhouse gas policy. It's not worded exactly as this one is, but we want to ask if how close are we to complying with Action 7, or will we have to redo that policy? The good news is we have something on the books now. It's just not as exact as that is. And those are all of them. Any questions or ponders or thoughts or?
Lots of questions, but.
No, going through it, it was like, oh, that's an interesting one. Such a bigger picture than we're used to, here in our, even though we think there's a huge picture here, but you go out 4 counties and there's a lot going on.
Well, it's hard too because the language is vague enough that it can apply to so many different areas, but at the same time, it's hard to understand what compliance means.
It sounds exactly like what you said it is. It's a rough draft looking for our feedback to tighten up language, and then everybody getting their fair share to point out what they like and don't like and see if PSRC takes it into account or not.
Right.
Does the city of Issaquah make the decision on which alternative to plan by?
Well, we give our comments to PSRC by the end of April, I think, what did I say, April 29th? And then the PSRC board, of which one of our council members is on the board, they do their deliberations based on all the input they have, and they'll choose one. And then we have to abide by that alternative. And then they'll go through and write the final version of Vision 2050 using that alternative.
And then come back to the cities.
Yeah, because then they're supposed to have the policies drafted by the early summer, I thought that timeline was. And so and all of the policies should be out by then, not just the 3 chapters. And so we're not sure if the council will want to go through those as well and want us to go through those as well. But we thought the alternatives are so, so high up that we thought bringing the policies to you just as a teaser for you to recognize why some of them, we don't understand what they mean to us. It seems like more of a conversation that would matter to Issaquah more than just the alternatives. So if you can't be here on April 1st, if you've got April Fool's Day things going on already, you can always watch it on TV afterwards to see what the PSRC staff person says.
With popcorn and.
My pajamas.
I'm envious.
Or I can hit the pause button.
Yes, or you can just heckle the TV. I mean, there's so much you can do when it's at home. Any other the other thing I learned tonight, we were doing interviews for more PPC members, and I learned tonight that the new members aren't starting till June. And on the back of your page, I always give you the new calendar, the new and improved. I've always thought that the new members start beginning of May.
They used to.
I'm not sure exactly when it changed, but I noticed it on the interview notes today. So I have to change the whole calendar around now that we have a month, there's a month off or a month different. And so thank you for being our quorum yet again. I know we're kind of limping along now that Lindsay's gone and Troy's gone. So thank you very much for being our quorum. I appreciate it very much.
How many applicants do we have?
There are 14 that have applied for either PPC or DC, and we're interviewing them all together in the hopes that we will be able to fill all the DC openings and PPC openings with this group of 14. That's the hope. We only did half of them today, though, so I'll let you know next week how we did.
Let us know if there were any standouts, too.
Fabulous people today. There are a couple of them that were just, yes. And they're sitting on either side of you.
Okay, so any other words of wisdom?
No, not for me.
Any updates? Then I'm going to close the meeting at 7:51.
Right.